like to call back to order and reconvene the regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, August 28, 2018, in our afternoon session here for starting out with Public Works, item 15A, the first reading, and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1808 in the matter of amending Lane Code 16.090 definitions, LC 16.210 F1 zone, LC 16.211 F2 zone, LC 16.212 EFU zone, LC 16.214 ML zone, and LC 16.264 telecommunication tower standards to update definitions, modernize terminology, enhance the user experience by simplifying the code, streamlining review processes, and aligning the code more closely with state law, and adopting a savings and severability clause, file number 509 PA 1605453. And we have, you're not Lindsay. We have Keir Miller here, so.
Thank you, Chair Bozovich. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Staff is just requesting that at this time the board move approval of the first reading of Ordinance 1808 and set the second reading and public hearing for a time certain of 1:30 p.m. on September 11th here in Harris Hall.
Any questions for staff on that?
Quick question.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, here I'm hoping this will be kind of interesting because we're right now getting some dialogue coming from folks on regarding Vickery Park and the potential siting of a tower there. And and again, I think what's important here is that no decision's been made. So right now they're going through a process, whether that's the place it's going to be or not, who knows. But I noticed in here one of the definitions, LC 16.264 telecommunication tower standards. Potentially, does this apply?
What these changes would do is they would modify existing code language to bring it into standard with some new FAA standards regarding basically small co-locations on towers, these sort of non-substantial. So it doesn't apply to new towers. These changes, it would apply to existing towers where they can come in and apply for a small co-location without a special use permit.
And that's fine. I appreciate that. It's just, appreciate Sarah Means yesterday giving me a heads up. Then I've received 2 phone messages and an email from folks and regarding that. But I think right now that's just very early in the process. I know no decisions have been made at all. So, but anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I'm pretty sure it'll be no comments and no one will attend the public hearing on September 11th because
I don't think
messing around with F1, F2, and EFU won't generate any public interest.
Yeah. I'm sure it won't be as colorful as the Chapter 13 hearing that we had last week.
So with that, I will entertain a motion on the first reading and setting the second. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of the first reading, setting the second reading and public hearing in Ordinance 1808 as read into the record by Chair Bozovich, so I don't have to read it, and setting the second reading and public hearing for September 11th, 2018 at 1:30 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for September 11th at 1:30 time certain. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Sorensen excused today. So that gets us to item 15B, which is Order 1808-2808, in the matter of delegating authority to the County Administrator to amend the Parks Master Plan contract with MIG Inc. to increase the total contract amount to $147,738, extend the term to June 30, 2019, and approve the use of $25,000 in special projects transient room tax funds. Mr. Mokahysky.
Why not? So, Mr. Chair, we've had a contract with MIG now, I want to say going on 2 years.
That's correct.
Year and a half to 2 years. And as the board knows, we reset our Parks Master Plan process. We've amended that contract several times to extend, largely in coordination with the Park Advisory Committee and the Park Master Plan Task Force that was created, to allow for additional public engagement throughout our communities. Public engagement has been really outstanding in this master plan process. And so this item in front of you, and I'll turn it over to Brett, our new parks manager, to give you a little bit more detail. But this item is really a cleanup item to just bring back to the board to say, you know, here's what the total contract cost is with MIG. Here's how we're going to pay for that. And we just wanted to make sure that that came to the public meeting. We had that discussion, but from a staff perspective, we really have driven the additional work that we've asked MIG to do as part of this process. So, and then I know that I believe in September, it's our plan to bring forward an item to bring the final draft plan to the board for discussion. So Brett, I'll turn over to you for additional comments.
Thanks. Well, good afternoon. So I'm here today with Sarah Means, requesting permission for the county administrator to amend the Parks Master Plan contract to MIG. MIG is assisting the Parks Division in our development of a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. This master plan is a guiding document that provides a roadmap for our planning efforts for the next 20 years. It was last updated in 1980, so it's nearly 40 years past due. Currently, we're at the critical stage of presenting the master plan to the public and soliciting comments and feedback, as Mr. Markowski suggested. County staff has presented a summary of the master plan to the public in 7 community forums over the past 2 months. Also, we have a public survey available online to the public until the end of the month. Park staff will incorporate public feedback into the final draft of the master plan and then present the master plan with assistance from MIG to the Master Planning Task Force on October 1st. The task force is made up of members representing different communities, stakeholders, and partnering agencies that were critical in the development of the plan over the past 2 years. Then, with hopefully the Park Advisory Committee's recommendation, Parks with assistance from MIG will present the master plan to the Planning Commission and the board on November 6th, asking for your approval and feedback. We will then return on December 11th to ask the Board of County Commissioners for adoption of the plan into Lane County's Rural Comprehensive Plan. So in order to make this plan a reality, we're asking for permission to extend the term of the contract with MIG to June 30th, 2019, and for the approval of use of the $25,000 from the Special Projects Transient Room Tax Fund. This would increase the total contract amount to $147,738. The transient room tax designation results in approximately $385,000 in annual revenue, with about $264,000 allocated for parks operations. An annual $70,000 is dispersed to Tracktown, and this leaves approximately $50,000 available for special projects as designated by the board. I've spoken with Sarah, and she believes that the 2 projects requesting this funding can, with permission from the board, sufficiently fund their projects using these remaining special projects TRT funds. With your approval, Park staff will amend the contract. An additional $25,000 in TRT funds will be submitted for appropriation in Supplemental Budget 1 for fiscal year 18-19. Thank you.
So I will just say that I'm only here because I don't really have anything to do with the Parks Master Plan process, but I do very much pay attention to what's being spent out of the Special Projects Transient Room Tax Fund, as that particular fund is still under my purview as Community and Economic Development Program Manager. So that's why you see me here. If you have any questions related to the funding mechanism, that's, you know, I'm happy to answer those at this time. But what I will say is we do have enough funds, sufficient funds to pay for the contract extension of $25,000 as proposed.
Excellent. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Lycan?
Just one comment, and that is, I think we heard loud and clear this morning when we received the update from Oregon 21 about their plan to utilize and really be an advocate for our parks here in Lane County. So it's kind of a nice dovetail, to be honest with you, taking a look at this. And I heard that loud and clear. I mean, that's pretty cool. It's just not about hotels, but it's also about our parks. And of course, we do have campgrounds in some of our parks here in Lane County. So it's kind of a nice dovetail of what's being proposed here. So that's no question, just a comment.
Yeah, and we're looking to improve the Armitage Park campgrounds.
Yeah.
With Phase 2 coming up pretty soon.
Excellent.
I think you'll find that during the month of August of 2021, you will have sold-out campgrounds no matter where they are in Lane
Yep.
County.
I agree.
Certainly.
Yeah, so my question is when do reservations open up for August of 2021?
It's right now.
Yeah, people
I've
should
been
be,
trying to get Harbor Vista for 3 months.
Yes, it's pretty booked.
yeah. So I guess, I appreciate you guys coming to us with the contract amendment. I just want to note that, one of the things we really asked for when we restarted this process was to have a very public process. We started out with a task force of community members. Was it 23 people on that task force? And they met, how many hours?
I'm not certain, but it may quite a while.
A
Yeah.
lot of, I was trying to figure out how many man hours were involved just in the
a
meetings,
few.
let alone them doing reading outside the meetings. A lot of involvement there, and now we've also gone out and held 6 public meetings recently around the county.
Yeah, we had 6, and then we also met with the Friends of Buford Park.
Yeah.
So,
So it, we're still taking comments until August 31st.
yeah, but we'll continue to take
Yeah,
comments.
yeah. So if I'm just encouraging folks that might be watching that they can go on to our parks, go onto our website under Lane County Parks and Parks Master Plan, and you can still fill out the survey and comment on the Parks Master Plan, read the Parks Master Plan there. But important piece of work. We talked 2021 and how they're going to promote the parks this morning. We also were talking about our hazard mitigation plan and how parks and open space fits into the mitigation plan, and as many of our parks are in hazard zones, i.e. floodplain, being the use designated and holding that area open versus being developed to something that would be damaged in an event. So it's, parks have, you've been wound into 2 other topics, whether you really knew it or not this morning.
That's fine.
And now parks are back for a 3rd, so an important piece. So this master plan is important, and I really appreciate the work that MIG's done so far. I think the document really stands on its own. Any other, Commissioner Farr?
The only thing I'm going to mention, Mr. Chair, is that you compare the discussion that we're having today regarding our parks, to the discussions we were having 5 to 6 years ago about our parks, where we're reacting to what seemed to many people like a haphazard use of our facilities. Whereas today, we're looking at a very, very structured and very forward-thinking use of the facilities. So it's great. I'm loving the process, and welcome on board to be a part of it.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so this master plan is just kind of a roadmap for the next 20 years. And so, it's going to be somewhat plastic and it can change over time, but it is going to be our guiding principle as we move forward.
Thank you.
So if there are no other comments from the board, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of Order 1808-2808 in the matter of delegating authority to the county administrator to amend the Parks Master Plan contract with MIG Incorporated to increase the total contract amount to $147,738, extend the term to June 30th, 2019, and approve the use of $25,000 in special projects transient room tax funds.
Second?
Been moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve Order 1808-2808. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Sorensen excused. Thank you.
Thank you
That gets us down to item 15C, which is a work session on the Lane County Forest Work Camp, and we should have
Need more room?
Betty Michaud and Jeff Turk
Hang out in the back, I guess.
and our county council here, so I don't know who's going to start us off.
How about if I just sort of tee up what I think the issues are, Chair?
Great.
And then Betty can fill you in on the details. I think one of the, just so you know, what I'm prepared to answer today is that I believe the board had asked what the options were at this point, and just a very quick review. You delegated to staff authority to negotiate a lease with Veterans Legacy, which was done. Included within that lease was an option to purchase, but the option was not, the amount of the purchase price was not set. So I've done the research, and it's my opinion that you can sell this to Veterans Legacy. I know, Chair, you asked me in passing, no additional process is necessary. You don't have to do any public offerings. You don't have to do any more process. If you can certainly just delegate to staff under whatever terms you think are appropriate to negotiate a sale to Veterans Lease without doing any additional public process. And with that, I'll turn it over to Betty to kind of bring you, review where you are.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. So I intend to just provide you a brief summary and update on the Forest Work Camp, and allowing the board the majority of the time for discussion, questions, and any further direction to staff. The Forest Work Camp property is approximately 105 acres and was developed with a number of structures and utilities which supported the former Sheriff's Office Forest Work Camp program. The last closure of the camp was in 2008, primarily due to the loss of federal funding. It's zoned F1, non-impacted forest land that is typically limited to forest and agricultural use. Various approved land use planning actions have allowed the property to be used as a correctional inmate work camp, and also for rehabilitation programs and services, forest management programs separate from correctional purposes. In order for the approved non-conforming use of the property to remain in effect, the Forest Work Camp must remain in continuous operation. Since the camp has seen its closure in 2008, there's been marked deterioration of the structures upon the property, noticeably water damage, roof damage. In March 2016, the board directed staff to undergo a request for offers, so potential owners and lessees could submit offers for the board's consideration. And also at that time, Board Order 16-05-0304 was adopted, which declared the Forest Work Camp as surplus property not needed for county purposes. The request for offers process resulted in a 5-year lease with Veterans Legacy, with their intent to provide rehabilitative and mental health services to veterans. A draft purchase agreement was an attachment to that lease agreement. Veterans Legacy has occupied the work camp since February of 2017, with their business model to fund their capital and operational costs by selling annual memberships, fundraising events, and pursuing grants and donations. Veterans Legacy has estimated there is still a significant amount of capital improvements to be made to the structures in order to become fully operational. They did retain a funding consultant at one point, and their funding consultant did identify the lease agreement itself as an obstacle in obtaining sizable donations or grants based on a short-term lease scenario. In October of 2017, Veterans Legacy then approached the county with an offer to purchase the property, proposing that whatever they put into the structures with improvements would offset their purchase price. At that time, they offered approximately $35,000. Since that time, Veterans Legacy estimates they put in over $100,000 of improvements. So they've established the water systems and the well operations. They've done general cleanup. They're starting to update the kitchen, working on fire suppression and the HVAC systems. So with that, Veterans Legacy hopes to begin offering services to veterans beginning this November. And we did have an appraisal done on the property, and the appraisal was approximately $110,000. So with that, Board Order 1608, 1609 delegated authority to the county administrator to negotiate and execute documents for a sale, transfer, or lease without further board action. So that reiterates our legal counsel's opinion that no further action by the board is necessary to transfer, continue the lease, or transfer the fee to another entity. So I do want to point out that to continue the non-conforming use, the Forest Work Camp does need to remain in continuous operations, and prior to Veterans Legacy obtaining the property, we were incurring costs of about $200,000 per year. And that was mainly due to labor costs and rotating shifts of personnel, just to have a presence at the camp to mitigate vandalism and theft. So, but also during that time, there were no capital improvements made to the property, so it continued to deteriorate. So with that, if you have any questions, Jeff Turk will also go over what maybe the purchase would look like and how we would process that, and pending further direction from the board.
Good afternoon, Chair Bozovich, members of the board. I think Mr. Dingle covered what was going to happen as far as, if a sale was closed with them. Essentially, the county administrator has been authorized to sign documents, which would include a deed. That order that Ms. Michal quoted gives him authority to sign the document, and at this point, since the board's already taken action to declare the property surplus under statute, then it would just be a matter of negotiating a sale and having the county administrator sign the documents.
Commissioner Farr.
This is a pretty exciting moment in time. You said, Ms. Bashu, I have to look this up. Oh, yeah. $200,000 a year is about how much we were spending just to keep it closed.
We had 7 to 8 people staffed pretty much around the clock to keep the camp in continuous operation. So it was primarily labor costs, some utility costs.
And we were fortunate at the time we didn't have wildfire or something else sweep through the area. I remember one night I got a call from the sheriff.
Yes.
We all remember that night. I don't remember for the rest of my life where I unauthorized gave him permission to allow the forestry department to use the property. So there were not only the monetary costs, but all kinds of other things that just kept it really kind of a gnawing problem for the county for all of those years. So $200,000, I'm not much of a mathematician. That's about every 5 years, that's $1 million, right? Okay. So I'm really pleased that we're at this point right now. And if you've been out there recently, you'll notice that it's not the same place that it was even 1 year ago. Certainly not the same place it was 5 years ago.
I believe
And we're,
oh, I'm sorry.
please.
I was going to say, I believe most of you have had the opportunity to go out and see the Forest Work Camp, and you can see the significant strides that Veterans Legacy has put into the property.
I heard of some unauthorized activity there over the weekend, but that was just a rumor. So a question for you, Mr. Dingle, and Mr. Turk, you can respond to this too. The property is appraised right now at $110,000. That is 1/10 of what we were paying every 5 years to keep it closed. I would like to hear, what would it take for us to offer this property for sale at $10? Or $1. I mean, I'm looking at, Veterans Legacy, every dollar they spend on property is a dollar that they're not going to be able to put back into the program. And in fact, we were spending double the appraised value every year just to keep it closed. And I'm interested in pursuing a way to not try to claw back some of the money that we lost all of these years, but to make it something that really is a part of the real, true legacy, not just of Veterans Legacy, but of Lane County. And people that can say for years and years to come that this is what the county did to help make this thing happen. So my question is, can we offer it for sale for almost nothing?
Yes. I mean, in this, as the way that I read the statutes is that it, essentially, we've got to believe and represent that we're getting a fair market value. And as you pointed out, it's not just a straight sale, because you've mentioned these other things. They put the work into it, so they've increased, they've done that. They've saved us, over the course of the lease, the period of staffing it, as Betty just said. So if staff decides that it's, that all washes out and that it's a value, yes, we can do that. The one other piece that's out there is whether there is a desire, which I think under this statute and under, because remember, this transfer would be made under the one where you're giving it to a qualified entity that's providing social services, right? That's that 271-330 sub 2. And so one of the things we discussed among ourselves was the possibility of either not necessarily a reversionary clause, but a clause that would assure for some period of time that it would in fact be used for this, which I'm sensing from the board, Captain Buckwald, I'm not worried about that, but it is, I would submit a prudent measure to put something in like that that says that it will, if we do make the kind of transaction that you're talking about, one of the consideration back would be that they agree that it's going to remain this type of facility for 10 years.
So a possibility would be a contract that offered it for sale at a low price with the exclusionary, what was the term used? Not exclusionary, but reversionary?
Reversionary.
Reversionary.
And there's any number of ways you could structure that. I mean, you could, we could set up a 10-year land sale contract, for example, with a balloon payment at the end that would be waived if it had remained in that kind of, I'm just throwing out ideas here.
Sure. And I'm considering how we can best put Veterans Legacy in a position to obtain the grants that really will, I expect, be readily available as soon as they have that deed in hand.
Right, and that's the other piece that I would say is I would, obviously, as the lawyer, I'd be working closely with Veterans Legacy and whoever is doing their funding thing to make sure that whatever transaction we structured with them meets the requirements of these folks who are willing to, or the sources of these potential grants, so that it's whatever title we give them or whatever transaction we work out, they're satisfied that it will mean that these large donor grants will become available. That's obvious. I mean, at least from my perspective, that seems to be the primary driving force here.
And Mr. Chair, at this point, I'm kind of acting rogue on this, but I'm making that recommendation, that suggestion, seeing how the rest of the board discusses this. And I personally would like to see the Veterans Legacy get the deed as soon as possible so that by November they can start applying for grants or whatever it may be. But moving things forward as quickly as possible to get it off of our books, out of our hair, off of our back, and let them do what they can and will do with it. So, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm intrigued by Commissioner Farr's comments, and it brings to mind leverage. So if we were to enter into such an agreement, I would think that that would be very, very beneficial to Veterans Legacies to go out and look for those partners to help fund. And if we did as Commissioner Farr suggests, then it seems to me like there'd be a great deal of leverage that you could use in pursuing some of those grants and other funds from a multitude of partners. So very intriguing.
So I'll jump in here for a minute. Commissioner Lyken mentioned this morning that he was happy to be wrong, and I was the other person that voted to divest ourselves of this property for $1. Because the $110,000 value, if I remember, the appraisal was based on converting that back to forest use, which means there was about $70,000 worth of demo work that had to be done, and then reprod, which basically took the value to zero. So I don't think the $110,000 is an accurate appraisal of the property. It actually has almost negative value, and when you count what it would take us to maintain it, it did have negative value, which was one of the reasons why Commissioner Lyken and I were looking to purely divest ourselves of fee simple title of the property. It was an albatross on the county. So I'm pleased to be looking at a way of transferring this to Veterans Legacy. I'm pleased we were wrong. You know, one of the things we were concerned about was Veterans Legacy was a brand-new organization that hadn't even completed their 501c3 status at that time. And not all charitable organizations managed to get as organized and functioning as they've been able to do from scratch, which was where they were basically when they put in the bid. And I, you know, a lot of that work, you know, goes to some of the folks that are involved in their board right now. They just did a fantastic job. And the model they're looking at putting in place there is one we're looking at putting in place at our MLK facility, which is low barrier to housing, intensive case management of a, and in their case, a veterans population, but it's still that whole housing first model. You know, so anything we can do, you know, we're getting ready to invest, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of state funds, tax credit financing, everything we can do, leverage to get MLK off the ground, including providing the property to Homes for Good. For how much are we selling that property to Homes for Good for? Does anybody recall? I think we're transferring it for $1 or something like that.
That's the number that comes to mind.
Yeah. So I think we could make a $1 transaction to Veterans Legacy. If we even have to have it be $1, if it just can't be a straight out transaction. I would like to do that as clean as possible with as few restrictions and reservations. I don't think it's necessary for us to, you know, say it has to be continued in that use. I think, you know, without the special exception, you know, and maintaining that use, it becomes worth basically, you know, the tear down of the existing property and reprod, you know, and then it's only beneficial to Roseburg. The only exception I might put on the transfer is some kind of agreement we could maybe get them to sign with ODF or look at to make sure that it can be possibly used as a fire camp in the future. It's one of the few places within 20 miles, you know, of a lot of forest. As we were looking at hazard mitigation this morning, you know, in our hazard mitigation plan, having a site for a fire camp and the ability to site a fire camp there in the future is an important value to me outside of this transaction. In fact, ODF and Roseburg were also looking at putting a bid in on this property originally because they were going to try and put a fire station out there, and Roseburg was going to use the rest of the property for their, you know, as they have the surrounding property and forestry. So I know that there was a lot of interest and a lot of value to ODF to try and maintain some kind of ability to utilize that property in a fire event, a wildfire event in West Lane County, which that's my district, so it's sort of important to me that we kind of maintain the ability to fight fire out there. And it literally is the only piece of open ground within 20 miles. So that would be the only, I don't think we need to provide a lot of language around how long they maintain their use, because I think that's the sort of thing that's going to tie up grants, and, you know, those sort of restrictions are the things that you don't really own the property until 10 years from now when you've met that 10-year obligation. You know, if I'm, you know, Mr. Banker over here could probably tell you, and real estate guy, that's the sort of thing that makes banks wince, you know, whereas a simple thing where we could maybe ask for them to get an agreement with ODF around, you know, future siting of fire camps, may not even have to be part of the transaction. Yeah, maybe just do that on the side because they need clean title. That's what really is going to help them get their financing, the cleanest title they can have to the property. So that's my thoughts on this. Commissioner Lycan.
I have very little to add on that, but I am in agreement. I don't think you need to have a clause stating that it needs to be Veterans Legacy in perpetuity or anything like that. I just don't. I think that we have an opportunity here to divest ourselves of that property, and it's in good use now. I say take advantage of it. I also like the idea. We don't need to gouge them. And this is a really, I'm glad Commissioner Farr brought this up. I'm in agreement. Let's just move forward and get this thing done, and then Lane County doesn't have to worry about it anymore. And the only thing our concern is that it's now in good hands, and it's going to be taken care of. And I think that's ultimately number one. The perpetuity issue, to me, I was, while we were going through this, just thinking about, I remember Kmart there in Good Pasture in Eugene. It's now called Kendall Auto Group. You never know. So that's why I just think we just divest ourselves and move forward on this. So I like that idea. Be done and make it as clean as possible. I think Chair Bozovich does have a pretty neat idea, though. We can talk to him about that if they're willing to allow this to be something where, in case there is a fire and they do need a place to have a emergency operation. I mean, that's a good idea. At least we can ask the question, see where it goes, and but we move forward on this clean. I'm good. So, which was, by the way, you're right. That was our whole conversation the last time. Be done with it. Get it, move out. So I'm good to go. This is great. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like we're moving toward a set of recommendations for you, Mr. Michalski, Mr. Dingle, Mr. Turk. But, I do believe that Veterans Legacy is already talking about how they can best assist in forest firefighting, either by training or even by already maybe even talking to ODF about it. So they're way ahead of my thinking on that one. This morning I promised a couple of quotes from Mr. Williams, and I do have a couple. One I like is, "This is the most exciting thing I have done in 20 years." I will echo that. It is pretty exciting what's happening. And significantly, what he said was, you can house people, but at the end of the day, you have to have outcomes. And that's what is being prescribed at Veterans Legacy, is outcomes, changing the lives of men and women who otherwise really have no course, no direction, and no support in their lives. So I'm pleased and proud that Lane County is a part of this. Mr. Michalski, Mr. Dingle, Mr. Turk, Ms. Michoud, Mr. Johns, thank you for being here today. Yay.
Thank you, everyone. I think you've got clear direction on that one.
Pretty clear.
So that brings us to our emergency business for today, and I just want to make sure people understand the reason it was listed as emergency is it came onto our agenda too late for the official notice period to be a normal business item, not that it is an emergency. It's just about notice. And it's a discussion regarding Lane County's public health role during hazardous air conditions. And this was something that was brought to my attention and asked to be a board item by Commissioner Williams, so I was going to let Commissioner Williams kick this off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had an opportunity to visit the folks up in Blue River on Friday night. There was an emergency community meeting at the school. A lot of distress over the smoke issue and the fires. And there have been various conversations before that and after that meeting that there are some things that we should be actively pursuing as a county, as a Board of Health. Some of those things, first of all, we have a number of people that are very, very vulnerable to smoke issues, whether they're old or very young or they have health challenges. Pretty significant impact in their lives when the air is foul. Today we have a fairly clean day, or at least it was last time I was out, but that's just the will of the wind, going this way or that. The fact of the matter is, this is a problem that will stay with us for more than a month, most likely, if past weather patterns are the same. So one of the things that came up in conversation was the fact that in the wintertime, we have the warming centers, the Egan warming centers. We should be looking at how we can make that happen in communities that are adversely affected with the smoke. So those people that are vulnerable, the unhoused, another large segment of folks that they don't have an opportunity to get away from it. not looking for facilities where the air is 100% pure. A facility where the air is better will do. South Lane School District has 3 buildings that have sufficient filtering to ensure a safer air quality. Harrison Elementary, Lincoln Middle School, and Cottage Grove High School, and other spaces. We could be looking at those. We could also be looking at those opportunities in the McKenzie Valley and in the Oak Ridge corridor. Great opportunity there for us to find those partners that we need in the community, public and private. Another thing that comes to mind, and people were asked, is about face masks, the filters. There are some inefficiencies with the filters because you've got to properly fit them and all. But I'm even thinking an improperly fitted filter is going to do more good than harm. So, you know, we need to be looking at that too. And then, of course, there would be distributions points for people that needed those masks. One last thing, I know Joe Niehaus from El Rapa was at the presentation or the meeting on Friday night. And El Rapa has been actually looking at regular box fans. Everybody has them. And they put a HEPA filter like you'd put in your furnace at home on that and filtering the air there. So I think there's some opportunity here for the county and public and private entities to come together and before the air gets really foul again, let's have a plan in place that can meet the safety requirements and needs that these, you know, the folks that are vulnerable to the smoke can be safe. And I think we have a role to play in that. And I think we have an ability to build those partnerships. So with that, I just thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Thank you. So I'll turn to Jocelyn Warren, our public health manager, and ask you for your input and thoughts on this.
Well, thank you for inviting us to speak on this. We have gotten a lot of public requests. There's a lot of confusion out there about the air quality and how to respond, and a lot of questions about the best way to respond. And I'm happy to share with you maybe first some of the work that we are doing, so you're familiar with the things that we have going on in public health around air quality. We have Selene Jaramillo with us today. She is our preparedness coordinator. She's been working for the last several months on this issue and picked up work that we actually began last year when we had some really significant bad air quality days. So I'll let her kind of go over first what we're doing, and then we can discuss maybe a little bit what else we could be doing.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to start by saying that in public health, we usually dread 3 out of 4 seasons a year, but not anymore. Because we have, like, when children are in school, we have all kinds of stuff being passed around, and then wintertime is flu season. So summertime for me as the preparedness coordinator used to be where I would go like, oh, we can relax for a little bit, you know. But not anymore. For the last 3 years, actually, I've been monitoring intensively the wildfires, not just in our region, but, you know, last year was certainly one of our worst, but even before that, there is something that the state activates. I think it starts earlier every year. I think this year we started in July, around the 4th of July, with the OHA-led Oregon smoke calls. And I've been doing those pretty consistently for this year and last year as well. And actually, I think we have dodged a bullet so far, knock on wood, because we still don't have a lot of rain, and the smoke season, there is such a thing as a smoke season now, and it ends when the rain starts. So the other thing that has vastly improved, besides our involvement and monitoring and analyzing the situation and to be able to provide information to folks, is the guidance from the Oregon Health Authority. This year they have a Oregon wildfire smoke protocol, And it's a little bit different than some of our neighboring states. For example, the issue of masks is addressed in there, and we are following their guidance currently. And I'll share with you where all that stuff is in a second. But I just wanted to say that that protocol, one of the things that it vastly improved from last year to this year was how a local health authority and the local governing board, such as the commissioners or the city folks, can set what will trigger the activation of cleaner air spaces. And they're definitely calling them cleaner because they're not really shelters, and the air is possibly not going to be very clean anyway, but better than the outside. So let me show you where all this is, and we've been collaborating also. I was at that meeting as well, and I was hanging out with Joe. I didn't get to speak, but I did hang out, and one of the things I was wondering is just how many people have air conditioning in a community up there, and I was surprised a lot of people do. And if they don't, they have some kind of filter. Fortunately for us, there's a lot of allergies here too, and those same devices that clean the air during, for pollen and all those other particulate things, airborne things, are also helpful in cleaning up smoke. So, and there was a lot of talk about that air filter, and so we have all that reference here. If you just go Lane County Public, there it is. So easy to find, first of all, because that's always my pet peeve. And maybe I should use this guy. It's loading, it's slow. Here it is. So it's right here, front and center. And this is what I compiled. And also, this is not just me. This is all the experts. So this is definitely the input from our health officer, Dr. Pat Ludke. And I've recycled a bunch of stuff from last year for sure. The first thing that I wanted to put front and center is what the air quality index levels actually mean, because people feel something or smell something, and it doesn't necessarily have a very clear interpretation. You know, what does it mean that the air quality is moderate? So this is the first thing front and center there. And then the other thing we can go to immediately is El Rapa, who is my best friend at this time, because really the first defense that we have against smoke is information. And our recommendation for public health is for people with all those conditions that you mentioned, actually try to avoid it. And part of the situation with the mask is that it does give you a false sense of security. So we really want people to find a cleaner airspace, to go watch a movie. And even if you're just a couple of hours in a clean air space, that actually does help recycle the air in your lungs and remove those 2.5 p.m. From deep within your lungs. So even a little bit of rest is very good. So just wanted to share that. These guys have now, look at that nice AQI. I am always happy when things are yellow, I have to say, because our trigger actually for activating an emergency or an overnight cleaner airspace, we have a plan in place for that, at least for the metro area. And we have identified a number of places that I will just show you real quickly. They are right here. Find a cleaner airspace. And then actually it was Devon who put all this up there. And she even verified and double checked that. What I did is I just contacted them and made sure that they had adequate filtering. These are recycled from hot days. So last year when I did this, I just said, well, they have AC because we've listed them for when the temperature hits the 90s. But I actually made sure that they were meeting the OHA standards for the MERV filters, which is a minimum of a 7, and these are 8. The recommendation is that we go all the way to 13, but that's not always possible because the HVAC systems don't always have the horsepower, I guess, to pull that air through. So, and that's just something, by the way, to consider in our own buildings here as we get these really frequent episodes of poor air quality, we may want to think about what we do in our own facilities. But anyway, so these guys have an 8. Eugene and Springfield, and then Cresswell, the libraries, and Junction City, Cottage Grove. So we can definitely add to the list. So this is, I think I put on here that this is always going to be updated regularly. I didn't want to say how often, but absolutely. But these are already places where people can go without us needing to activate anything special. The other type of overnight cleaner air space we've been talking about with the Human Services Division and they've got a relationship and I believe a contract already with St. Vincent de Paul to help out during the Egan Warming Center activations. And so we are still, we haven't completed we were very close to a contract. In fact, I think we had one last year when we had the nastiest air.
We had agreements.
We had agreements. So we've revisited all those relationships, and we're close to moving into having an actual agreement with them to open a cleaner air overnight space. We're trying not to call them shelters, but in that case, it would be a shelter, really. The other thing that's already in place, though, and also for the Mackenzie folks, is the COAD. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the COAD. COAD is the Community Organizations Active in Disaster. That's essentially United Way, Catholic Community Services, Food for Lane County, and a host of churches, Love Inc., there's just like 30 or 40 members at this time. And guess who the head of the COAD is this year? It's Linda Cook. So, yeah, I'm not sure why she wanted to do even more than she already does, but she's our fearless leader right now. And I'm also part of the COAD leadership. And so Linda has already put out a call for fundraising and donations to go through that network for filtering units. Because as you know, I was thinking about this a couple days ago when we were up there. Actually, I guess that was Friday night. What happens if the temperature goes down? You know, we can't really say turn on your AC anymore. So you really want alternatives like an actual HEPA filtering, fine particulate matter type air filter. And they're not super expensive. You can find decent ones for about $140 for home use. So they would really be helpful to somebody that needs to control their respiratory management regimen, you know, and that isn't an inhaler, et cetera, because those folks are going to be experiencing episodes and triggers and stuff at a much lower threshold than anybody, even like moderate levels, but in the higher end of the scale. They really know their stuff, so they're already coordinated with their healthcare providers and such. So, and a lot of those things can actually, I think you can do a prescription for them, you know, so there's a lot of room for that. But for anybody else that doesn't have access to that, we do have a mechanism in place right now where we can make a request of the COAD for anybody up there in the Mackenzie area right now. That was the activation. It actually happened, I guess it happened on Friday. So that's already done. These are our cleaner air spaces. I don't know how much time we have because I can talk about this forever. This is what I wanted to share with you. We currently have a network, El Rapa, and I do feel like it's we because we work very closely. You can see here that they have us listed as one of their most important partners. Because they really get the brunt of the health questions, and that's unfair to them. They're really the air monitoring people. We are the health people, so they're happy when we answer all those calls about what, you know, what's going to happen to my lungs, kind of a thing. So here it is. There's a monitor right now up in Mackenzie, and this is pretty close to real time. And you can see that they've had pretty consistently good 1 hour, 3 hour, I don't know if you guys can read that 12 hour, and even the previous day, this was excellent. The problem is over here, these guys have been Currently, they're in the red, but even just a short while ago, they were still in the orange levels. And I think this is the one that's over at the school. And they're getting that nice wind flow going this way, so that's not very nice. And then we have our monitors here. I called them earlier today because one of these monitors was in the orange. I think it was the Amazon Park one, while everybody else was still holding on to nice green colors and a little bit of yellow over in Springfield. But look at that, they're back to green. So this is what I really recommend for people that are in that super sensitive group categories, is that they need to monitor the air and they need to be aware of what's happening and what's coming and plan their life, unfortunately, according to that. I heard a really compelling story from folks in Reading that were paying attention to all this information, and they were like, look, honey, it's moderate, let's go shopping, you know? So that's kind of what you unfortunately have to do, and we don't want to be in that situation. There's one more thing I want to share with you. Last year was really, really horrible. I went in and ran a report on LRAPA, which you can do. And last year we had a total of 4 days in the unhealthy or red range for Eugene and Springfield, and 8 in Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge. And then the orange red was 8 days for Eugene range, 5 for Cottage Grove and 8 for Oak Ridge. And then we were in the hazardous or very unhealthy for 3 days in Eugene, 2 for Oak Ridge, and 0 for Cottage Grove. So that was last year. So this was this is very, very real. This year, so far, I'm going to show you where we have been. Because when I see this, I'm like, this looks fantastic. We've only had a couple of times that we've even gotten into the really unhealthy. We've been close. This moderate, levels in the 90s are not necessarily great air quality, and certainly folks with COPD or asthma are going to feel it. But, pretty starkly, sharply in contrast to what my colleagues in Southern Oregon have been experiencing. So this is what I mean, that we've had a very nice summer, really. And even though I've been super busy monitoring air quality and sending reports to my boss and working with all these other folks to try to have things in place for specifically the most vulnerable.
So as the rep to LRAPA, I got to jump in for a second. The chart you just had up there,
This one?
yeah, those colors are based on the 24-hour average
Yeah.
AQI.
Correct. That
Does
doesn't,
not,
yes.
so one of the things that you can do off LRAPA, and when you look at those monitors on the map, you're actually looking at the actual most recent reading.
Yes, these are different ones.
Yeah.
That's what the.
Yeah, those are 24-hour average.
Correct.
So, we all know how sometimes overnight things can change.
Yes.
And you might get good air quality during part of the day and really bad during others. But, it's a matter of watching, because you can get, just a couple hours where we'll be up in the orange or red during the course of the
Yes.
day and drop back down, and the 24-hour average may be
Exactly.
in the yellow.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
it's where, if you're sensitive, you need to be watching that more immediate reading.
And DEQ, well, I don't want to bore you with all this because you can look at it. I'm just like such a data geek. But there's an app that I have on my phone with the DEQ info too for the entire state. Mm-hmm. So, because some people don't just stay in Lane County, you need to go to Portland, and they've been having some really bad, much worse air quality than that we have. Let's see, is there anything else that I didn't share from my page over here? Masks. Let me just tell you what we have put up here is the statement a direct quote from the Oregon Health Authority. And it is that issue about the fit testing, and how we've seen some really, really unfortunately erroneous information. For example, somebody giving an interview up in Portland just a few days ago saying that all children should be wearing an N95, when the reality is that they're not made to fit a child. So, that's sort of like the balance. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Jocelyn, but it's I am fitted to wear an N95. It's horrible. I don't like them. They make me, feel like I'm choking. So you kind of add to the, the effect of just wearing this thing if you're actually engaged in doing an outdoor activity. If you're outside for a very short period of time and you just need something to protect yourself from the discomfort, that's one thing. But if you're actually going to go outside for a jog or something like that, which we've seen people do, that's really what we're advising against, that really the mask is not offering, there's not a huge amount of data on that. That is true, but there's not really offering you the level of protection that you may think you have. So you go out and, instead of leaving it for tomorrow when the air quality might be okay, if you're flexible like that. Now, if you're a worker and you need to be outdoors, that's a whole different matter. That's like an OSHA thing. So I think that's where I wanted to stop, because it's just, and the mask discussion continues, I have to say. I have other colleagues in other places that are, really have been under smoke for 6 or 7 weeks now with air quality. I mean, they do things like announce when the air quality is going to change so people can open windows and stuff like that. And specifically in Jackson County. And there's just probably a need for that mask situation to be looked at again. But the reality is that, especially for the levels of air quality that we have experienced here this year, it was not something that our health officer really felt strongly about, going against what the Oregon Health Authority recommended.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see that we've done so much research on it and that we do have some advice available to people. I'm going to be a little less kind probably than Commissioner Williams is. You say you're a data geek. We all kind of are. We love data. I'm a human suffering geek. I hate it. And sometimes people aren't going for a jog. Sometimes people need relief from discomfort.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's a child who the N95 won't fit. So what I'm particularly interested in is finding ways to do things that we're not doing right now to give people relief from what potentially is going to be choking, hazardous situations, and not just at, let's see, the Hilliard Community Center or the downtown library. The fire right now, and this is Commissioner Williams' district, but I drove through up there, and potentially the fire that we're seeing right there may be small potatoes compared to what we're going to be seeing later on. We have 6 or 8 weeks of dry ahead of us, 6 or 8 weeks of lightning strikes that potentially could create what's akin to a flash flood, a flash smoke event that has people scurrying for the exits. And if they haven't seen the data, and if they don't have immediate emergency information, what they can do for their family right now, then they're going to be finding themselves scurrying to try to save the family. So the great, and Ms. Jaramillo, this is fantastic stuff. It really is. I'm amazed. I had no clue that you'd done this much work and that you'd coordinated it so deeply with the balance of the state and other places that are in far worse shape than we are. But what I'm personally looking for is how do we get people at the family level to understand it. And then the next step is I'm going to go back to early days when we're providing housing, something I know a little bit about, not much, but a little bit. HUD would not allow us to build houses that weren't up to a certain standard, almost feeling that people were better off under the bush than in a house that didn't have hot running water. And so the N95 that's not properly fitted, or whatever mask it is that keeps the large particulates out, what can we do to make certain that people are able to find comfort and find respite for their family when the emergency is occurring? And in a couple of different areas. One is the safe breathing places, understanding that it's not going to, it's not going to give them people perfectly pure air, and also the filters attached to the fans, which I know Commissioner Bozievich employs that, and others among us do. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to ease the problem. And I'm hoping and expecting that we can find ways to get emergency information to people to tell them what they can do. For instance, a wet cloth to wipe down the inside of their house, you know, as opposed, instead of vacuuming, you know, just simple things that we may know and may take for granted, but other people may not know, and just giving them a little hint as to how to ease the worst part of the smoke event. So I'm kind of speaking out of turn here because I do live in town, and if I have a problem, and I do have an air conditioner, we also have a sealed house. That's great, but you know, a lot of people don't. And a lot of the people that and Ms. Musicant, a lot of the people we deal with here don't have those things. So and a lot of people that we deal with who are living up in and around Oak Ridge and in and around Mackenzie Bridge don't have the types of things that we take for granted. So how can we get the information down to the very base level where people can find, without having to dig for it, respite from the immediate smoke event that's starting to take over?
So I believe that Joe Niehaus, so there's a whole response up there.
Yay.
And so, you know, Commissioner Williams was there. What is your sense? Is that pretty representative, the amount of people that were there?
Yeah, it was comparable to several of those same events last year with the Jones Fire.
Yeah.
And some of the other, Rebel Fire, I think was more in that area. But yeah, I think there were maybe 50 people
I
there.
thought there was more. It was
More?
pretty packed gym. I
Yeah,
thought there were more.
Yeah, and
I
that
went
was,
to the 7:30 meeting, so they definitely got all this info. And let me just show you
But I
this
will say that
thing.
if there were 50 people there, that means there were thousands of people who weren't.
Well,
So, and, you know,
right, so that's why I'm asking, that's the tactic right now, even at the evacuation level, because there is difficulty in disseminating information electronically. There's no cell reception. There wasn't at the school. So the folks that are on the ground have all this information. They have paper handout versions of all this stuff that we've left with them. Joe Niehaus was part of the PIO team. She volunteered her time over the weekend to be part of the responders down there. So I know that they got at least at that meeting, but also ongoing from the folks that are responding and that partnership between us and El Rapa. And this is the box filter that Joe brought, and we also have this on our website.
And once again, I'll direct this to you, Ms. Smokeraxy. This is all very comforting, and it really is addressing a few people. But we need to have a comprehensive response. And I'm not saying that we don't, but it seems that we have all of the information and all of the recommendations, finding a way to make sure that everybody hears it, finding a way to make sure that everybody knows where they can go or what they can do without having to go to the gym at Mackenzie Bridge for a particular meeting.
So I know that they're doing stuff even door to door as necessary.
Okay.
That was my sense from being at the meeting, that there's a,
And once again,
how many people up there.
It's excellent, and I am amazed at the quality and the amount of the work that you've done, and I'm pleased that you are here and on the job. And I think that taking your work and making certain you can distribute it right out to the top of the Three Sisters and to Hasita Head Lighthouse.
and Devon has also been doing a lot of work pushing this out. So we did a press release. That was a few weeks ago, I think a couple of weeks ago, when we did that. So we can always push it out again.
Thank you. Well, I'm through talking. I'll leave it to the rural commissioners.
I just want to clarify something real quick. There hasn't been any evacuations
Correct.
today.
No.
I thought I heard you say there had or something.
No, that even for things like the alert sense, where people subscribe to get that alert up there, it doesn't always work. Last year they had that situation. So the strategy this year that I've learned is that there's a lot more one-on-one and door-to-door in that area. My understanding is that the fire is far from the community this time, and because of the terrain up there, it's unlikely, knock on wood, to actually be as threatening as perhaps last year's fire was.
Yeah, the location's different. I guess the question is, that door-to-door and all that plan was about life safety and evacuation for the actual fire. I think what Commissioner Farr is pressing is, how do we get that same intensity of communication out there as to how people can handle the potential health effects of smoke? And we kind of, I love that you got the do-it-yourself box fan, because I did that my wife has asthma to the point where she takes, daily medicine and inhaler and all that stuff. So for me, it's a big issue. And last year. Fortunately, these things happen at the end of the season when box fans are cheap. They're on sale at Jerry's. I tell you, they want to get rid of that stuff before it gets cold.
Yeah.
So go out and buy your box fan. I did it with a 4-inch thick 20 by 20 MERV 13.
Nice.
So it's a little bit bigger, bulkier filter, and I use duct tape to attach mine up there with,
Yeah.
seal it.
Saves you about $5 for all that.
But I think it's
fancy
more
hardware.
important to go back to that graph that you had at the top of that rather than the how to put it together.
This is from Puget Sound Air.
Yeah. You can tell the difference. When I turn those box fans on, you can almost immediately feel the difference in how much easier it is to breathe in my house. And, you know, the MERV 13, even with PM2.5, is only about 60% efficient. But once you've had it on a couple hours, you've turned the air over multiple times through a 60% efficient filter, you can drop, you know, that PM2.5 down into that good range pretty quickly.
Yeah. And
One of the
these
things we
guys-
keep talking about is we keep using the term PM2.5 and good, healthy, and all that stuff. I don't know if the public quite understands, first of all, what is PM2.5?
Right.
What are PAHs? Why is it so bad for you? Because I think that's something that's missing from this whole conversation. We keep saying unhealthy, unhealthy, and people don't really get, it is significantly unhealthy. This small particulate we're talking about, and particularly with wood smoke, it's just like saying the PAHs that are in wood smoke are the same ones from diesel smoke, and no one would want to suck on a bus tailpipe. Yeah. So just kind of explain to us, what are the actual health hazards around wood smoke, and what is PM2.5 and what are PAHs?
Do you want to talk about that? I mean, I have a little bit of a blurb here, but
If you don't, I can probably jump in.
yeah.
Well, I mean, if you would like to speak to that, that would be great.
More
I
importantly,
mean,
how do
it's of
people
course
protect
most.
themselves from it?
Yeah. But I mean, I first want to just, why is it important to protect yourself? I mean, PM2.5 is the abbreviation for particulate matter 2.5 microns or less. And why is that so important? At that size, it gets into the very small passageways in your lungs where you exchange gaseous chemicals between your bloodstream and the air, which means it's getting to the point in your lungs where it gets to your blood. Now, one of the things wood smoke has as part of that is these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. They are carcinogenic. They also do things like trigger asthma and all the other stuff people talk about in allergies. But this is really bad stuff. It's the whole reason why there are EPA and air quality health standards around PM2.5. You know, and the science is getting developed over the years, so we keep lowering the standard. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Oak Ridge has had so much trouble attaining the standard, is they get to a point where they think they're attaining it, and EPA and the U.S. go through, and the World Health go through a few more studies, and they drop that standard. So this is about, cancer, long-term health impacts, from breathing this extremely unhealthy air. So, that 35, micrograms per cubic meter, which is what 100 means, is what EPA is determined is a, that and below is a quote, safe level to be exposed to. Really, there's no safe level of exposure. It's just what they feel like the risk doesn't rise above the 1 in 1 million cancer deaths or whatever the level of health concern. So really understanding that this is about something that could actually really damage your health, this PM2.5 wood smoke. And now the next question is, how do we help people protect themselves? How do we first, let them know how hazardous this is? Because this gets to a whole nother issue of trying to teach people about outdoor burning and doing that safely. But, alerting people there is a health hazard in this, and then how do you protect yourself? And then how do you protect yourself if you're low income or housed in not normal housing? And that's really where us as the public health agency, I see us as having that responsibility. How do we communicate to people, educate them on the hazard, and then how do they mitigate that hazard? And, cleaner air spaces is great, but of course, most of those are in urban areas. The folks that live out in Blue River may not be that close to a cleaner air space, and the folks that are down in West Fur may not be that close to a cleaner air space. And at the same time, those are some of the lowest income, highest poverty areas of our county. How do they do this? So a $20 box fan on sale at Jerry's right now, and a $10 air filter, and a $1, $2 roll of duct tape, or a screwdriver, a few things that can take your air quality down that quickly inside your house to get rid of that PM2.5. That's a great bet for a lot of residents.
Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me just for a moment. Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Williams asked for this item to be brought forward to have this discussion, to hear an update on what our public health role in responding to air quality incidences are, and potentially are there some things that we aren't doing that we could be doing in coordination of that. And I thought that Selene started off here with a very astute point, which is we used to have a 3-season public health preparedness. This is really a year-round thing. So this is not something that is, we've talked about from a housing standpoint. Boy, winter's rolling around. Maybe we should think about what's going to happen with all the folks who don't have housing for the winter months. It's something that's happening every year. So we really need to start treating this, I think, organizationally as a recurring event. And so planning for it in advance. I mean, I think it's good we're having the conversation now, but the reality is we're at the end, hopefully, nearing the end of the fire season and the bad air quality. So the thing that comes to me is, what are we going to do moving forward, and particularly for next fire season, having this conversation in advance of, and then it occurs to me, boy, having these types of conversations 2 or 3 times a year with the board, because you do go through cycles. We have the vaccination and the things that are being passed through schools. We have this season, so maybe thinking about this as a regular Board of Health update. And then I'll share one other thought with you, because I think that in that way we can get feedback from the board on thoughts that you may have or what you're hearing from the community. And this certainly, there are aspects of public health that are critical here, but there's also the general emergency preparedness for our organization. On September 11th, I think very appropriately on September 11th, we're going to have an item where we'll be bringing to the board an amendment to Lane Manual to discuss transferring the emergency management function from the sheriff's office into county administration. And Lance Inglet is here from Public Works, our interim assistant Public Works director. The intent is for the emergency management function to have a higher profile in the organization, to have a more global reach organizationally and community-wide, to have active collaboration and partnership. And we also know that we need to invest more in our emergency preparedness. The reality is that the sheriff's office has not been able to do that because of limited resources there. So I'm saying all this to sort of preempt that discussion, because I think we have a real opportunity here to think about the public health emergencies, the other emergency we have, and really identify where there's a nexus between public health incidences and emergency preparedness, and maybe become a little more proactive at the policy level so that we're engaging in these conversations 2 or 3 times a year in advance of those seasons, so the board knows what staff is doing. Staff has an understanding of where the board's policy direction may be on some issues. So I'm going to add this as a potential note for an assignment moving forward for next fire season, but also to talk about periods of the year that it would make sense for us to come forward and have these types of public health emergency issue discussions with the board.
Commissioner Lyken in the queue, and then Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Lyken.
So with that, you probably should have waited until I was finished. So, because here's my first question to you is, you have this information. How many other public health authorities in the state have this information? Or are they doing the same thing that you are?
Actually, Haley might be able to answer. She's my liaison with the HESPER program at the state. So on the smoke call, pretty much every county and the tribes are there.
Are you coordinating with them?
Yeah.
Yes,
And
There's the Oregon Smoke Blog,
So-
where everything gets,
so my next question is, if you're coordinating with them, can you then provide the information to Associated Oregon Counties? So when Susan Morgan is sending out information on fires throughout the state, she can also be providing information on health issues, smoke calls, that type of thing as well, so it's a coordinated effort. That would be my
We'll look into that.
recommendation.
Sure.
And because obviously the Southern Oregon what's going on down there is exactly what happened here last year.
Yeah.
The other piece, and I'm going to throw this to the board now, and you'll have to make this decision. I believe that this should be a united front agenda item. Public health caused by forest fires, because the reality is, these fires are happening on federal lands. They're not happening anywhere else. Federal lands. This is in they should be really working on this to deal with this, and they're not. They are dropping the ball. So you look at federal lands here in Oregon, you're looking at lands in Washington, you're looking at Idaho, British Columbia. They're all government-owned lands. And frankly, the only way you can get through to Congress is all of a sudden have information on what this is doing to people's health. So people with asthma, Jay talked about his wife, I deal with that. You're talking about somebody who had an anaphylactic shock whose O2 was at 60. I thought I was checking out. This was a year and a half ago. I thought that this is it, I'm out. Nice life. And so, no, this is happening with people's lives. And the way to get through to Congress and folks is for people who have a background, expertise, public health authorities saying, this is what it's doing to people's lives, right here. But I think the first step is really coordinate this with AOC and have Susan Morgan. So when she's sending out information on fires, she can also be sending out information on what's going on with people's health being caused by these fires. And so I like the idea of making sure this comes back, but having this information on health is an enormous leverage. It's the kind of leverage, and by the way, we heard from Oregon 21 this morning. If we deal with these forest fires in August of 2021, World Track and Field Games will not be coming back to United States soil again. That's it. It's over. We just basically told IAAF, you know what, we're not interested in dealing with this, and we're going to cause the athletes dealing with some sort of breathing issues. Coming here to the United States is just not a good idea. Frankly, that would be one of the poorest messages you could ever send to the rest of the world that, hey, we don't care. You know, you can wear a mask when you're running at 10,000 meters. I'm sure it's really comfortable. So anyway, those are my general thoughts, but I think public health is an enormous leverage, a huge leverage. And that's why I think I would recommend having a conversation and adding it as a united front item. And, but I think in the meantime, coordinating with AOC and Susan Morgan, I think having that information being sent out on what this is doing from a health perspective really hopefully would cause folks, and especially elected leaders, or in particular, people in your profession, to say, this is really having issues on people's lives. Thank you for the information. I really appreciate it. And I just remember last year, and we stayed indoors most of the time. Couldn't even go out. It was pretty horrible. Been able to go out a little bit this year. It's not as bad, but still, you know, we saw those readings. By the way, those readings were the same, those unhealthy, hazardous readings. I don't know, about 2-3 weeks ago up in Spokane, Washington, they were registering between 350 and 400. It was pretty significant because they were getting the British Columbia fires on top of the state of Washington fires. So anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you for the update and the information.
Mr. Mokowski, or do you want to? Go ahead.
I just,
Commissioner
I
Williams.
guess what I would like to see is a message to the citizens that this is what we're confronted with. This is how you can deal, how you can mitigate with some of the symptoms, how family can work with others in their family that need a little assistance. They may not realize that this is unhealthy thing, so they go out and do a lot of vigorous activity. But if we had like just a one-pager, put it on a website to where I could take that and I could put it on Facebook. And I could use social media to where I know how to get this stuff. Most of the people, well, frankly, a lot of the people that live in my district, the very rural parts, there is no internet service to them. So to go to these websites is just really a non-starter. But if they come into town and they're in other places and they have Facebook on their phone, now there's an opportunity to get the message out. So I see this as more of a grassroots type of thing. Let's figure out what message it is we want to send, make it as brief but concise as it can be, inclusive in information that's meaningful. And then hopefully that will be shared. And I think, I'm not a big social media guy, but I think if there's a reason for social media, it's this kind of stuff that would get me more interested in that. But I think a lot of people are involved in social media. I think that's an avenue that we can get to the citizens that may not look at El Rapa, may not have never visited Lane County's website.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look in that direction. I just can't thank you enough for your presentation today. It was very, very clear and helpful. It's good to know that those things are being done. I just know that the weather's going to change, the wind's going to blow this way, and it's going to be very unpleasant for a lot of folks. And again, it's the unsheltered people that can't get away from it. So,
Correct.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mokajewski?
I just, Mr. Kyler, our intergovernmental relations manager, just shared with me that there's the Oregon Department of Forestry and DEQ recently reviewed the Oregon Smoke Management Plan to evaluate the effectiveness of that plan, and they're proposing changes to the plan under their respective authority, and so they've asked for public comment on that, and they've extended the comment period until 4 p.m. on Friday, September 14th. So another thing that we potentially should look at doing, I think, is scheduling an item potentially on September 11th to have that discussion so that we could submit some comments to the state as it relates to what our role has been, what the impact has been in our community, and things that we're looking for from the state on that. We could also share some of those comments, I think, with our federal delegation.
Yeah, I testified to that last year.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Ms. Mokajewski. And if we do send someone to testify, may I nominate Ms. Jaramillo? What a great presentation you just gave to us. The information that I just heard from you, I'm very pleased to know that we have gathered all that data. You've done your work. In fact, you've gone far beyond anybody's expectations in doing your work. Now it becomes our work to get your work down to the base level so people can use it.
Sure, I would be happy to talk about it. However, I think Dr. Lutke would be way more suitable to talk about the health effects and all that stuff.
You have a nicer voice.
He can rattle it off. We could do it together.
Don't tell him I said it.
But, I mean, what I was trying to do was just to present to you what I have been doing. And I have to admit, there's a lot more that can be done. This is just me in my spare time, listening, to the smoke calls and then passing on little reports to the public health supervisors and managers and to participate in the planning. But certainly I agree that there could be more resources devoted to a more robust plan of attack for this in the future. So.
And I would guess you work past 5 and on weekends too to get this information out because
like I said, it
smoke
used to be
doesn't
nice
wait.
in the summers, not anymore.
I think, Mr. Mokajewski, your suggestion that this is a long-range plan as far as a county response, we need to take care of this year, just as we tried to last year. And then for the future, just having something more robust in place. And really, at the end of the day, the way I would judge my efforts is if on Thursday night I'm at Harrison Elementary School and I go to somebody in the corner of the room and say, what do you do when smoke hits your house? And if they can answer my question, I'll say we've done our job. If they can't answer my question, then I've not done my job yet. So that becomes really the bottom line is, do people know what to do? Even though we have debated it and we know what to tell them, have we told them yet? Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for coming, and, you know, I have to play off of something Commissioner Likens said about getting the health impact out there. It's making statewide news how much money the Shakespeare Festival lost this year.
Yeah.
Why isn't the health impact making that same kind of news? You know, if it's tourism dollars, that's making the news, but if it's, you know, how many people are you know, missing work days and ending up in emergency rooms with asthma attacks and just the general population health impact, that's not making news. And I think that's part of our job, maybe as part of United Front and other efforts. We need to try and raise the level of the health impact of this, not just the tourism dollar impact. There's more than just tourists that are impacted by the smoke. So I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate how much work's already been done. You know, obviously you guys have been working on this, but this is kind of like we you know, 4 or 5 winters ago, we were only talking about Egan Warming centers and how we were going to fund them through the winter. And then there became the winter strategies, and we were always seemed like we were taking action on them at the end of November or sometime in December. You know, winter's half over. Even though smoke season's maybe half over now, it could, you know, smoke season could go to October. You know, you just don't know with the weather when it starts raining. There's still enough of it left. I don't want to miss the fact that there's still a lot of impact we can have if we can get the word out to the folks about the danger and then about how they can protect themselves from that danger, and particularly what we can do as a public health authority to help those vulnerable populations that are low income and unhoused. So I really appreciate Commissioner Williams for bringing this forward. Appreciate the work staff's already done in preparing for this. And we'll just keep moving on from there and see what else we can do to try and get the word out. Just having it here today, I'm sure is going to get the word out to a certain degree. And I'm sure we'll be spreading this on. Now we know where the links are and everything. We'll be sharing it out onto social media because, you know, none of us are on social media. Mr. Twitter. So we'll get it out there, and we'll see if we can have an impact with the rest of smoke season, because I'm sure we're not done with our orange and red days in Lane County. We've got a week and a half of dry weather predicted at this point, and a wind change that's going to bring smoke into the valley again. And we'll be seeing the same issues as last year, hopefully not as bad, but you know, we've got a fire in Lane County now, so the impact can be even greater. It's not just about getting the smoke from Canada. Mm-hmm. So really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, we'll go to review of assignments.
Well, so that was, I just took some notes on that discussion, and that's the only item that I had. But what I put down here is that we will bring forward a public health and emergency preparedness updates to the board periodically throughout the year, potentially 3 to 4 times per year. I think 3 times might be a good number, and try to really combine our emergency preparedness and emergency management updates along with the public health, public outreach aspects of that. So I'm noting that between Jocelyn and I and Dan Hurley and Lance in Public Works, which is where the emergency management function is going to directly report, we'll take that on. And then I also have a note just that we will continue to work through our public information office in county administration, health and human services, and the sheriff's office to effectively communicate public health information regarding air quality this year. So let's deal with the immediate issues that arise and make sure we get the public good information as quickly as possible. And then we'll deal with the longer term planning efforts in the course of the next year.
Excellent. Also thought there was some follow-up on the forest work camp. That was
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
the forest work
Yeah,
camp,
what was the follow-up on the?
just to work with veterans.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, yes, we're going to, yes, so there was direction provided on the work camp, and I can make a note of that, that we'll work on developing language and executing the agreement for the transfer of ownership.
Excellent. So is there any other business before the board today? If not, we are going to be recessing into executive session. I don't believe there's going to be any need for us to come back out in a public session. I don't anticipate a need to come into public session to make any decisions, so we'll probably adjourn out of executive session for today. But today, the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 1926602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session. As previously announced, no decision will be made in executive session, and we will most likely not be coming out in the public session, and we'll probably adjourn from executive session. So with that, we are in executive session. We'll be moving to the Board of Commissioners conference room.